Good morning, and the microphone volume is superb. I think, unless people's ears are hurting, I was told that someone readjusted all of our settings and put them down to 0. So our technical team just made a guess as to what the right volume would be, and it worked out, I think, rather well. No one's holding their ears. No one's holding behind their ears. So good morning. My name is Jon Dreazan. I'm the lay leader for today. We also have the pleasure of a guest sermon from our friend Cheryl Meinschein, who is graced us in the past with sermons, and retired Lutheran minister who's ecumenical, and we do appreciate her help as we work with lay leadership. So welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Pottstown. We're a liberal religious community. We ask only that you obey our major precept of respecting the inherent worth and dignity of all people. Thus, we welcome all people, regardless of color, creed, race, prior religious beliefs, sexual orientation. It makes no difference to us. All are welcome here as we work together in our goal to reach the best spiritual plane as per our personal beliefs, as we have no guidance beyond our own soul and willingness to grow and learn. With that being said, do we have any announcements for the good of the fellowship?
Good morning, I'm Linda. I would like, if people can stay after the service, we'd like to have a town hall meeting. The board of directors would like to get some input from the friends and members regarding how we want to move forward with some of the investments. So if you can stay, grab your coffee afterwards and a little snack and come back in and we'll have a group discussion. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Kay. I think you all know that this Saturday is our 55th anniversary, and we're planning a nice big party with good food, etc. And it's going to start at 5:30, and we'll just gather, and then we'll probably start eating around 6 o'clock. And we're going to have a slideshow done by Erica Dusky, which is going to be a lot of fun, and the choir is going to sing a song. So we hope everyone can make it. And don't forget the food that you're bringing. All right, thank you.
Yes, at all costs, don't forget the food. There are other events, but food is principal. Also, I want to make a quick announcement. As you go into the social room, that commented last week, please note the increasing amount of painting and the lovely painting on the far wall where the screen is. I thank the committee that does such things. And as was said, it allows us a greater chance of rental because the space will look very, very attractive. I turned off the bright lights in the corner, so the far end is going to have a nice look with overhead lighting, and it's very peaceful, I think. So, Alan, if you could do me the favor of being the chalice lighter within one of our traditions to open our service with basically the UU concept of the eternal light, which in Judaism and the light that sits above an altar in most Christian churches. At times, our own light goes out and is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lighted the flame within us. And I thank Albert Schweitzer for those wise words. So I will ring the chime. It is our symbolic time to grow deeper into our spirits, to try to keep everything silent, both in our phones and in our minds, to better prepare for and listen to the service today. As Emily would say, ringing this actually induces patience because it's still making some noise. So I'm going to be patient, wait for it to quiet down. So the opening words are 446. This is an homage to our pagan ancestors. If I'd come here early enough, I was going to have people reading in all four corners of our sanctuary, but other matters precluded that. So I'm just going to read the whole thing, but think as if we have people in the four corners here. To the four corners, The spirit of the east, spirit of air, of morning and springtime, be with us as the sun rises in times of beginning, times of planting. Inspire us with a fresh breath of courage as we go forth into new adventures. Spirit of the south, spirit of fire, of noontime in summer, be with us through the heat of the day and help us to be ever growing, warm us with strength and energy for the work that awaits us. Spirit of the west, spirit of water, of evening and autumn, be with us as the sun sets and help us to enjoy a rich harvest. Flow through us with a cooling, healing quietness and bring us to peace. And finally, spirit of the north, spirit of earth, of nighttime and winter, be with us in the darkness, in the time of gestation. And I was going to start our first hymn, which is really the beginning. It's hymn number 1 in the great hymnal. May nothing evil cross this door, and please stand if you are willing and able. Thank you all. And as we sang this, I hope as you did the second stanza, you offered some thoughts and prayers. Speaking of the battering rafters and so forth, you know, think of the people in Haiti, Puerto Rico, and Florida who were in fact literally battered recently. Right, so Ms. Ruby, if you wish to come forward for a time for all ages, and I'm told that our hand mic is working, so you don't have to worry about the cord today.
Good morning. All right. Good morning, I'm Miss Ruby, and I have a story for all ages today. And my story today is called The Scarecrow. It was written by Beth Ferry and illustrated by the Fan Brothers.
Autumn sunshine, haystack rolls, scarecrow guards the fields of gold. No one enters, no one dares. Scarecrow stands alone and scares. The fox and deer, the mice and crows, it's all he does, it's all she knows. She never rests, she never bends, she's never had a single friend. For all the woodland creatures know not to mess with the old scarecrow. Then something drops down from mid-ear. A small, scared crow is lying there. Broken nest, broken wing. Then Scarecrow does the strangest thing. She snaps her pole. She bends down low and saves the tiny baby crow. She tucks him near her heart of hay. She lets him sleep. She lets him stay. She doesn't stop to wonder why. She sings the sweetest lullaby, and safe and warm, the baby mends. These two make the oddest friends, but friends they are right from the start. The crow grows strong near Scarecrow's heart. And he will peek out at the barn, and he will perch on Scarecrow's arm, and they will laugh and wish on stars that shine so bright, burn from afar. So crows and birds. So crows are birds, and birds must fly. The fledgling spreads his wings to try. Crow dips, then soars, and calls out loud. Scarecrow cheers, pleased and proud. But as she watches, Scarecrow knows that she must stay and Crow must go. Summer sunshine, autumn chill, snowflakes make it colder still. Then something drops from mid-ear. A large black crow is standing there. Scarecrow's arms are open wide. Crow spreads his wings and swoops inside. Her joyful heart is brimming whole. A friend will mend a broken pole, and he will spruce up matted hay, and he will say, I'm back to stay. Summer's over, springtime's due. Is there room enough for two? Flowers blooming, fields green, 5 small eggs are tucked unseen. Scarecrow guards them, for she knows that soon they will be baby crows. And she will love them from the start, and she will grow up, and they will grow up near her heart. And they will peep and perch and play and make her happy every day. And as the seasons come and go, they still love their dear Scarecrow. The end.
We're indeed fortunate to have Miss Ruby, who does such a wonderful job entertaining the children both here and now we will sing them to their class. So now is the time of the service, which is true in every religious institution in some manner, way, shape, or form, which is that, spiritual or not, the reality of life is that spirituality doesn't pay the bills. And so with the help of somebody, we'll pass a basket, and we appreciate anything you can donate to the welfare of our ongoing finances as per the discussion from our president. Actually, it's a good thing if Carly finishes her little tune and we're still passing the basket. She may have to extend her music a bit longer if we have more people to whom to pass the basket. That's for the future. So I have a reading, which is a Native American reading. If you want to open your hymnals to 614, this one requires some participation, unless anyone may have fallen asleep. This is number 614. It's for our Native American heritage, which is so intrinsic in our country and so trampled upon, unfortunately. So I'll read what is in the bolder print, and you guys will do the italics. This is called the Sacred Hoot. It does, I think, have some connection to the spirit of the sermon upcoming. Then I was standing on the highest mountain of them all. And while I stood there, I saw more than I can tell. And I'm just getting confused. For I was seeing in the sacred manner the shape of all things of the Spirit. I saw that the sacred group of my people was one of the many groups that make one circle. Why is daylight and starlight? Thank you for reading. It does harken back. Sorry. Okay, sorry. I'm just my brain's tired today. To the shelter of all the children of one mother and of one father. Sorry, I preempted myself, but there is the expression, I think, from another faith or Shakers that, someone do a small circle, people couldn't fit. So they do a bigger circle and people all were embraced by it. So it's a concept that is not novel, but hopefully should encompass all humanity. So the next hymn is one of my favorites. It's one we've done many times in the past because I love it so much, and I so respect Norbert Capek, one of our martyrs of the past. It's Mother's Spirit, Father's Spirit, which is number 8. And so once again, please rise as you are willing and able. Just a quick comment, and you've heard me say this before, but as you notice, Norbert Capek point of death was 42 or 43, and I guess it's from my Judaic heritage, but much like many of my Judaic brethren, he perished in Auschwitz during World War II. And so I guess that I feel that deep connection to him and to his song. So we welcome back to the pulpit today Reverend Cheryl Meinschein. Cheryl and I, as I've said before, go back a very long way, having met at on the death of a patient and a parishioner, where we both met each other at some ungodly hour of the morning. Cheryl to provide spiritual support to the bereaving husband. My more simple task to come and fill out a death certificate so that we didn't have to have the parade of an ambulance and other paraphernalia to interrupt that sacred time in the middle of the night, and thus begin our relationship and friendship that has persisted to today. So now that she's retired from her Lutheran ministry, we've availed ourselves of her services from time to time, hopefully again in the future. And we will welcome her to speak on the topic of the awakened brain, science and spirituality, our quest for an inspired life. And I turn the thing over to you.
Good morning. It's good to be back. About a year ago, I found this book called The Awakened Brain, New Science of Spirituality and Our Quest for an Inspired Life. And I thought, wow, science and spirituality, this would be a great book to use with Unitarians. Maybe they'll ask me back. Well, the book, let me start with the disclaimer. The book is not exactly what I had hoped for. It's actually a lot about the author's expanding spirituality as she deals with her own situational depression. But for me, it's been a great jumping off point for some thinking and wondering about the biology of spirituality, mental health, and how spirituality gets developed in the first place. It certainly got me moving down a bunch of rabbit holes that could keep me quite busy for the foreseeable future. This morning, I'd like to invite you to come down the rabbit hole with me as we look. So first, a little bit about the author of the book, Dr. Miller. First, she's the author of a book called The Spiritual Child, and is also a professor in the clinical psychology program at Teachers College at Columbia University. She's the founder and director of the Spirituality Mind-Body Institute, the first Ivy League graduate program in spirituality and psychology. So I went to their website to read a little bit about that institute, where they state that it exists to integrate spiritual life into our society, in our institutions, in our boardrooms, in our classrooms, and our homes. Not all places where spirituality is always a part. Our SMBI team works to contribute toward a more loving, spiritually aware, and positive society. Our professionals collaborate on all levels of society, working with communities, business leaders, organizational and educational consultants, and policymakers, which to my surprise included the Army and the Department of Health and Human Services. More on that later. To see into a more life-giving way of making decisions. So the first thing that I looked for in Miller's book was a good, clear definition of spirituality. And it wasn't easy to find. So maybe the best way is by looking at some of her writing. When talking about spirituality, she writes, each of us has the ability to fully develop our innate capacity to live through an awareness of love, interconnection, and appreciation of life's unfolding. The Awakened Brain, the title of the book, and the way she talks about unfolding spirituality, is the inner lens through which we access the truest and most expansive reality that all of life, and by this she means human and non-human, is sacred, and that we never walk alone. Our brains are wired to perceive and receive that which uplifts, illuminates, and heals. She's very careful to differentiate between spirituality and religion, rightly so, I think, and talks about a higher self, a higher power, and the importance of transcendence. She's very careful not to limit spirituality to a belief in God or gods. If this sounds a little fuzzy to you, you are not alone. I was looking for a paragraph where she wrote, preferably in italics, I define spirituality as, and she never did that. At least not in this book. This morning I did something which I almost never do, which is about 15 minutes before I walked out the door to drive here. I picked up her other book, The Spiritual Child, and that's where I found the definition. Should have read that one first. It's an inner sense of a living relationship to a higher power, God, nature, spirit, universe, the creator, or whatever your word is for the ultimate loving, guiding life force, and a vital source of daily guidance. So that's her definition of spirituality, which helps some, I think. But she takes this further in this book, where she talks about the difference between two kinds of awareness. One, an achieving awareness, and that's the perception that our purpose is to organize and control our lives. It focuses our attention and commitment necessary to set and maintain our goals. It's a very focused, like a kind of to-do list kind of awareness. But that's not the only kind of awareness she talks about. There's this awakened awareness, where she would maintain in that kind of awareness, we realize that we are loved, we are held, we are guided, and we are not alone. To quote her, we understand that life is a dynamic force that we can attune to and interact with. At one point, she even goes into quantum physics, which I had to reread a little bit about that. If you watch the TV show Quantum Leap, it's one of my favorites. They talk about quantum theory, where particles are connected, that were once connected, are always connected through time and space. And that's the kind of interaction that she's talking about, a realization that we're part of a whole, both human and non-human. If you're made up of atoms, you're part of it. She says it's no longer me against the world or me treading upon the world, but me hearing what life has to say, aware that life is meeting me where I am, part of that universal whole. But let's move on. I don't know if you caught it, but Miller would say that all of us are born with an innate capacity for spirituality, or the ability to recognize this connectedness. And I wonder if that isn't tied in with a child's natural sense of wonder about things. But again, to quote her, every human being is born an innately spiritual being, just as we are cognitive, emotional, and physical beings. Basic science, and she did twin studies to come up with this, has shown that spirituality is 1/3 innate or genetically acquired. And the rest is 2/3 socialized or learned, a birthright of every child which must be cultivated, supported, and nurtured in community to fully develop. In other words, that spirituality or that tendency toward it is like a muscle that needs to be nurtured and exercised. Miller continues, in tandem with other lines of development, there's a surge of awakening that happens during, you guessed it, adolescence, during which spiritual formation can be supported. That really needs to be. I often wondered, we used to teach confirmation when kids became adult members of the church at 7th and 8th grade. And I think that's probably the worst possible age to try to teach anything, because their hormones are so wacko that if they retained anything during confirmation, I regarded that as a major miracle. But at any rate, she always said that's the time when spiritual formation needs to be supported. We see through hundreds of peer-reviewed articles that a child is far less likely to fall prey to the most prevalent forms of suffering, anxiety, depression, suicide, addiction, once the spiritual core is built. And she went through some of the numbers through other studies. If a child has a strong spiritual core, there's a 60% less chance of depression, an 80% less chance of addiction, and 82% less chance of completed suicide. Those are pretty significant numbers. She says the deepening of the spiritual core throughout childhood and adolescence allows us to transform suffering into post-traumatic spiritual growth. She talks about spirituality and depression as being two sides of the same door. The depression, and she's not talking about clinical heavy-duty medicated depression. She's talking about the kind of depression that all of us go through. That in order to go through that, that can lead to an expanse in your sense of spirituality and can help pull you out of that, but also helps force you to deal more with your spirituality. Then she goes on, this basic science does not tell us how best to support the spiritual core, but it is an ethical imperative of schools, parents, and the community to nurture each child's innate spirituality to promote a life of greater thriving, health, and collective engagement. So then I wanted the next chapter of the book to be, how do I do this? That's not in this book. That's in The Spiritual Child, which I will order from the library and read as soon as this is over. I ended up going back to the website for Spirituality Mind Body Institute, of which she's the director, and there was all kinds of stuff on there. There's the Awakened School program, that's curricula for kids K through 12 in building that spiritual core. There's an Awakened Campus program for college kids, programs of 8 weeks, 1 hour a week, 90 minutes, to focus on identity development and spiritual individuation, figuring out what they believe as opposed to or in connection with their families of origin to develop their spiritual core. But what really got my attention were Miller's collaborations with the military and the Department of Health and Human Services. First, the military. First, I've got to tell you, I was surprised to read that Miller was working with the Army. And I guess I shouldn't have been. It's no surprise to you that the military is experiencing alarming increases in the rate of suicide, depression, anxiety, addiction, and ethical lapses such as problems with racism and sexism. What Miller's research has shown is that individuals with that more highly developed spiritual core are less likely to exhibit those behaviors. Therefore, the military is not stupid. They became more invested in providing ways to exercise that core. And I went looking on the Army website, but like I said, there were a lot of rabbit holes. I'm surprised I finished the book at all. And I found a brochure called Boosting Resilience Through Spirituality with the soldier on the front. And they came up with the definition of what spirituality is. It says spirituality can help you feel connected to something bigger than yourself and build resilience at the same time. Your spirituality can involve whatever beliefs and values give you a sense of purpose, which is pretty God neutral, I guess you could say. For many, it may be a relationship with God and certain religious practices. For others, spirituality plays out in non-religious ways, such as a focus on family or nature, and in some of their material, or on your fellow soldiers. So it kind of goes through there. This brochure also offers spiritual fitness tips, which I thought was interesting. Look to your leader or chaplain, connect with others, practice the spiritual disciplines of your faith, practice mindfulness, do mind-body exercises, take spirituality with you, be good to others, and embrace your belief in a higher power. About 10 years ago, the Army tried this before, and they had a questionnaire you could take to rate yourself on different aspects of spirituality, how often you think of purpose, how you relate to other people, how you're connected with the world and nature. And I tried to get a copy of it, but it was done like on your phone. So as you would do that, your answers would be input into their database. And for people who were low scoring, they were followed up and worked on their spirituality as the Army defined it. It should come as no surprise that there were some folks, particularly folks who identified as atheists, who found that exercise not helpful because it was very focused on higher power religion. So it will be interesting to see how now, 10 years later, I'd love to see 5 years down the road, what the Army makes of this project. We'll see. But Miller also, with the help of the Templeton Foundation, has been working with the Department of Health and Human Services to increase mental health care among marginalized groups like veterans, African-American men, caregivers, and the elderly, folks who are less likely to go to a therapist, but are more likely to go to pastors or other trusted people in the community. And one of the programs she described was happening through Duke University with their Center for Spirituality, Theology, and Health. I didn't know such a thing existed. But they worked with the Athena Health System of 450 doctors. This was one of their projects, to see if they could get their doctors to change their attitude and practice in terms of integrating spirituality into their practice. So over a 6-month period, every patient was asked at the beginning, at 3 months, and at the end, 3 questions. First, is there someone who loves and cares for you? Second, do you have a sense of peace today? And third, is there a source of joy in your life? Not questions I normally get when I go to see my general practitioner. If the patient said no to one of these questions, the physician or the practitioner could either deal with the questions themselves or refer them to a spiritual care call center where a chaplain or pastor would deal with their concerns. And further follow-up would be done either by the practitioner or by someone at this call center, usually conversations of 15 to 30 minutes. The call center folks found that most of the folks who were referred, about 20,000 of them over a 6-month period, were people who were lonely, who wanted the opportunity to talk. But for me, the most interesting feedback came from the doctors who self-identified as atheists. And they commented that even though they were not believers, they could see that their patients benefited from this kind of interaction, and they would continue this module in their practice. And in the group discussion following the video, other physicians raised the question of how to convince the administration to add this element to their visits, given that they are often expected to how long are the blocks, John? 15-minute blocks? If you're going to add this extra element, how does that work into increasing the time with the patient? And the presenter said, well, you have to have management on board in order to do this, obviously. And what happened in this case was a member of upper management had her child treated in this facility. And while the medical care was excellent, the care and compassion were less evident. So she wanted to make sure that those elements were included in care, not only of body, but of spirit. It's all interesting stuff. And there's always more to learn, but I think I'm going to stop there. So to conclude, thank you for joining me on this trip down the rabbit hole this morning. If you would like more information on any of these topics, grab The Spiritual Child by Lisa Miller, which will give you many of the things that I was looking for. Check out the website for the Spirituality Mind-Body Institute, or the Center for Spirituality, Theology, and Health at Duke University, or Google Army Spiritual Readiness. One of the next steps for me is the book that was referenced, Jeff Levin's Religion and Medicine, a History of the Encounter Between Humanity's Greatest Institutions. The reading list never ends. So, amen. There you go. So, I believe there's a question time.
Yeah, does it go place?
No.
The microphone passed around. See, we have a budding union minister here. Whether say it or not, that is one of the most union-oriented. So don't leave this out. Thoughts I've ever heard from anybody anywhere. And the position we have resonance. So we now have a moving mic. I discovered it's working, so we can pass it around. Anybody want to raise their hand? I know Alan has to be, ready to say something, but anyone want to speak first?
If anybody has a definition of spirituality, I'd love to hear it. I mean, I think it's something we all assume we know what it means, but if you forced me to put it into words, I don't know what I would come up.
Okay, Alan.
You mentioned going down a rabbit hole. I found myself invite me to go down a number of different rabbit holes in my career, because my mother was a teacher, and we went from place to place, and that meant going from Sunday school to Sunday school, and getting a lot of different attempts or getting that religious education. The one I am most grateful that did not go down is George Mormon. I lived in Utah for a time, and they tried to get me there to go into that. Well, I figured out very shortly, very soon, there was no rabbit down there. Their product was quite mad. And oh no, it's the spirit. Yeah, I think I get evidence of need for it in the hospital home where I'm currently confined. People need to have some spirit infused in them. I can't just be there. They have to be around it, and people have to come around. I once called a daughter of one of our patients an angel. She did not understand why. I said because she gave so much hope to the poor other sad relatives that she encountered. And I've seen very strongly, even in the last week, that age is not kind. Age is not kind to everyone. But to have something to look forward to have some place for their spirit to go is helpful. And because I've been in so many different places where my spirit was challenged, I was smart enough to walk away from them, but I'm glad it was there. It was interesting, you know, at least it was interesting.
Yeah, I don't think she used the word hope in her definition of spirituality, but I think that's certainly an element of it.
Quick comment that the survivors of Auschwitz, we dealt with them in Cape Town. If you ask them why they survived, I guess that's what it would be. They had a fire, a small fire inside themselves that demanded of them that they survive, just to carry on after the fact. I think that's been proven in the past.
I had an 11-year-old, and I remember when I was a young person, and I didn't grow up in a religious household at all, but I had lots of friends that were Christian, so I went to a lot of youth groups and stuff like that. And I'm trying to let my kids expose them to a lot of things and then let them kind of grow as I was able to do. My parents weren't like very supportive of faith, but I was able to I had a lot of chances to go to different churches and things like that. So I'm trying to do that for my kids. But how would you help a young teenager, develop a spiritual path? Because I'm trying to be open and let him do his own thing. But right now he's like, I'm an atheist. And I'm like, I just want you to be open to the possibility that we don't know. And she's like, okay. How would you think, what do you think a healthy way to expose kids and help them grow their spirituality?
Well, I can tell you what doesn't work. It's what my mother tried with my brother to force him to go to church. That's not going to make it. So often, and you all know, probably could answer this probably even better than I. Kids learn by watching their parents. And I think the most you can model if you can model acceptance and openness, and they're also going to watch to see what their friends are doing. So,
My father was a Methodist minister who came from the West Bridge. And, he was asked when I was with the father, if he wanted me to follow his footsteps. His answer was that no, he wanted to be better for his son than we stealing sugar. So they're gonna find out what he's going to do.
yeah, do any of you have things that you found work with your kids or grandkids or? That's a tough age. And sometimes it's just easier to say, okay, and wait for a better time.
Any other comments from anybody in this open period? I did have a family in the past where some 50-year-olds had raised their children. Their daughter went to Florida at some point and became heavily involved in prostitution, her drug habit, and four children were taken away from her and went to the court. They were given two choices: either they would go into foster care or they would adopt them. And as compassionate grandparents, they adopted all four children, who probably, if I recall, ranged like 9 to 14, if I recall. And they lived in what are called the projects, which is not the best area, subsidized housing in Reading. And I once asked one of the kids, you know, why should we do this, well, why should we get co-opted into this neighborhood with pregnancy? And she said, we're in church all the time. You know, that may have been forced, but, you know, it got the kids, I think all of them, got through, graduated from high school, Reading High School was not an easy place to graduate from, and came out and some went to college and they lived their lives, but they made it through. And it may have been a sort of a forced process, but it did serve its purpose, you know, whether you can say the church was spiritual or not, it did give them a much better start in life than they would have had if the parents, grandparents, and parents had not insisted upon that course to them.
Yeah, one of the statistics that she mentioned is about 30% of the current generation of young people defines themselves as spiritual but not religious.
Yeah.
And that percentage is going up with every generation. So if that's true, and I believe it is, how do you exercise or get those children to develop that muscle, which is already there, that curiosity about the world and what is my place in it? And I think that's something we need to continue to be working on, because that'll change.
I'm Sally, and you just said it. What comes to me with young people is to maintain their curiosity. I think that's really important. And the Dalai Lama said so. I think so did Einstein. You know, maintain your curiosity. Read fairy stories is what Einstein said. But if you can be curious about what is, and you know how nature works, we can go deeper and deeper in whatever field it is that it will take us. I think to that sense of something bigger than ourselves, and who knows from there. You know, I think it is hard to define spirituality, and perhaps it's different for a lot of people. I appreciate what you said and all the definitions you shared. Thank you.
One of the things she talked about was alpha waves, high amplitude alpha waves that meditating monks give them off, people with high definitions of spirituality give them off. But those same alpha waves are generated by the Earth's crust up until a mile up, which I didn't realize. I thought that was a human thing, but apparently they occur in nature as well. So that kind of attunement, plus given our innate curiosity about that stuff, has got to all connect. So nature, I think, is one way to certainly get into it.
I love what you just said about curiosity. And I think it just makes me so much more prouder to have this discussion and be a UU, because I think we're exactly like the path for that, because we're not putting a box around whatever our children choose. It's just an open slate, like in a safe place to develop that. I think that's what we can offer them here. And we do, and I think we can keep doing that even more, but yeah, having these discussions with them. And I can't wait to read this book and learn more, because it seems like in the several UUs within the country have had this as one of their books to read.
Read the
just,
spiritual child first.
yeah, yeah, I just was saying, it's, like you said, it opens doors to conversations.
There you go.
My adopted son found his way, whatever it was, whatever you want to call it, by becoming a rock climber. He climbed.
So perhaps, Reverend Cheryl, you could write down some of the great resources you mentioned at the end, because they kind of went by verbally, and I'm not sure about other people, but as I age, my short-term memory is not kind of what it used to be. So perhaps you could either send it out to someone as an email, which can be disseminated through those who have that power as potential reading for anybody. It would be helpful, I think, for myself, maybe for other people.
Not a problem.
And we'll leave it to the worship committee to, with willingness to perhaps have future sermons, if everyone feels appropriate. So, Alan, if you could do the favor of extinguishing the chalice. And so, as I tend to say, we extinguish the chalice, but the way it has presented to us today will stay with us, I'm sure, in our hearts and souls from the gains of our spiritual presence and with you today. Thank you so until we meet again. All right, we have a final hymn, which is 347, which is Gather the Spirit. And so, once again, I got out of sequence here, but that's what the brain is today. So we'll close up and have to tell us not lit. So if people wish, if you are able to stand, if you wish, for the final hymn. those words are 682. And this, again, comes from the Native American tradition, because I think they have much to teach us. Beauty is before me, and beauty is behind me. Above me and below me hovers the beautiful. I am surrounded by it, I am immersed in it. In my youth, I am aware of it. And in old age, I shall walk quietly the beautiful trail. In beauty it is begun, and in beauty it is ended. And I'm going to, because of time, Carly, if we can maybe hold off on the post-move maybe until later, maybe when we're leaving, just because of, we have time, we have a meeting upcoming. So we'll share the joys and concerns, we'll kind of end our recording if we will, and we can then share in the sanctity of our own souls here. So if any have joys and concerns,